Welcome, everyone. We have with us Martha Eddy. Martha is a somatic movement coach. I'm going to look at the words. I know Martha, and somatic movement therapist and the founding director of the Center for Embodied Learning and Dynamic Embodiment. Welcome, Martha. So glad to have you here.
What a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I enjoyed our last time together, and this is such an important topic you're raising at this time.
Mm,
Mm.
yes. Thank you, Martha. Martha, tell folks about your work, and I know like your path to embodied services and embodied practices is a little different than some people might be used to thinking. And so why don't you tell us what you're up to and how you got here?
So interesting. So my work is a is about movement, and it's about feeling our body while we move,
Mm,
which is kind of ties in to things like somatic experiencing, where during psychotherapy and trauma release, we feel into our still body or our breathing body.
mm,
What I find really important about the work of somatic movement is that it moves beyond those smaller, gentler movements, which are critical and very much a part of our paradigm, like taking care of self, being mindful, being quiet, being restful. We've been working with the idea of rest. I have been even with
mm.
serotonin since the 80s. That was some of the research I did as an undergrad. Really, the importance of sleep and rest, and really loving Tricia Hirsch's work around rest as resistance to capitalism and the forces of do, but rather being in culture and being in passion and caring and interconnectivity as humans. Movement takes us into that realm as well.
Mm,
When you think about indigenous cultures, many, not all, have a dance form. It could be a dance in preparation for war. It could be a dance celebrating harvest. It could be a dance preparing the rhythm for digging and planting. Um, it could be a rain dance and relating to nature. So dance is, I feel, underrated in Western industrialized society. It is used in exploitative ways in many forms, entertainment, distancing, sexualization. It is used just to go out and kind of get high or drunk and move. So, conscious dance or conscious movement through space is my work. And it can
mm,
be about a walk and how you come into a room. It can be how you rev up for an activist moment. It could be about celebration of a win and the group coming together, but not necessarily, getting into a drunken state, but literally being conscious of their celebration. It doesn't mean you can't have a drink or two, but really not using it as escape, but as conscious celebration. So those are just some examples of why movement, I think, is scary to the world and why
mm.
yoga took off before some of the somatic movement work. So I, for instance, wrote a book on somatic yoga, a somatic approaches to yoga, because I knew more people were practicing things like the sun salutation than they were going into rooms with people and dancing and moving in these different ways. So I like bridging. I love working through stillness and postures and yoga and movement. And I like connecting it to everyday life and to collective work.
Oof. That is so exciting and so clear. And I'm like, I have so much to say about dance. Let me say some things about dance. Um, and then maybe go back to some planned questions. But I'm just thinking, dance is extremely gendered and racialized in America. Um, I remember my ex saying once, maybe men don't dance because dancing is sexy.
Mhm.
And then he's like, or actually, white men don't dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight white men don't dance. Again, it's like,
Get into the intersectionalities. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Like the whole WASP culture is unexpressed, capitalism. You wear a suit, you don't wear a crown, like taking away expression as a sign of power as we get into a more mechanized culture.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. I mean, just that, thank you for bringing in costuming, if you will, and just the dance of self-care can go into, wearing feathers because that is the beauty of nature, right? And taking that on, the crown of gold if it's not coming from extractive gold and hurtful to people, whatever it might be, and that men can wear, we know in nature that the male gendered birds tend to be the more bright colored and if
Vocal too. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yep.
mhm.
That's very cool. So what you've kind of hinted that like movement brings an additional level of self-awareness. What are some examples of like how self-connection can happen through movement? Self-connection, I'm also hearing connection with others, can happen through movement where it may not be able to go as far with a stillness self-awareness.
Mhm. Well, we're in the realm of what in the pop culture is called body language when we talk about that. What for me with that question. So we're moving all the time, right? Just with every word. And I personally am someone who has, what's the word? Embraced that I need to quote Sir Ken Robinson. I can tell more about that. I need to move to think. So, in other words, if I'm searching for a word, I let my hands go, oh, I'm circling, I'm searching. Ah, there's the word searching. Often my body has a cue into what I'm feeling or thinking before it comes to the cortex. It's living in subcortical areas. So my work is very based in neuroscience, and I thank Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen for that. I started studying with this founder of body mind centering, one of the early somatic systems, in 1976. So I'm coming up to my 50th anniversary of the work, and I taught in her certification programs. I remain a licensed teacher of body mind centering. And body mind centering is about embodying all the tissues of the body. In other words, what are my bones providing for me? Structure, form, solidity, but also the ability to heal and adapt and create red blood cells. I mean, it's pretty amazing. What are my organs doing for me? Well, each organ has its own story, and Chinese medicine gives us so much information about that and how it connects through the meridians. But in general, the organs, what are they doing for me in general? They're a deeper, more hidden source of power, if you will, or feeling, or um, and their volume. They create volume for keeping my body kind of shaped. They have shapes. They contain things. A bladder can contain urine, and so some things contain, some things pump out, like the heart, but it's bringing. So these containers contain different feelings and emotions, it's postulated. And I don't tend to Mickey Mouse like this is this, although a little bit lungs about grief and um, the colon about holding on to what you don't need anymore, the large intestines, getting rid of shit, this kind of metaphor are very real. And so I'm getting to this thread about movement, which is embodiment is really important. Embodied cognition is a buzzword in anthropology and psychology right now. And often it's looking at these metaphors in language and how they have shown up from the body into action in the world or mood in the world or behavior.
Mm,
When we're involved with movement, we're looking at how posture shows up in talking. Do I keep it rigid and still, which is my WASP background. I come from white Anglo-Saxon Protestant tradition, 14 generations in America. Um, and the space that I'm in right now kind of represents that. Um, and what is it to break free from that and be able to be free? And luckily, I grew up in Spanish Harlem, so that gave me a whole other rhythm in my body, which shows up. Rhythm is the movement that we move with, right? And so it could be more flowing rhythm, it could be more bound rhythm, it could be more um, sustained and silent rhythm. It could be a lot of quickness and excitation rhythm. So this is what I mean by movement. This is about body language. And it may show up just in my tone of voice
mm,
because speaking is movement.
mm,
I have trained speech therapists, not as many as movement uh, experts, and massage therapists come to this work because they want to understand what happens when you get off the table. How do you come to sitting? How do you walk? How do you stand? How do you go out into the world? So, body language and those transitional moments from lying to sitting to standing, what we call the four dignities, are a big part of somatic work and somatic movement work.
yeah, this is so fascinating for me. I'm mildly synesthetic,
Hmm.
so like, which is part of why I'm drawn to dance, right? Um, because when I hear music, I am moving, whether I'm actually moving or not. The movement is in me, right? Um, and there's all these other metaphors, right? There's the what is your body doing with the music? What is your body doing with the emotions? What are your, I mean, your organs, right? Organs give us life, right? Organs allow us to function physiologically. There's no, you don't have to bring in a metaphor for that. And metaphorically, what does it mean that they're giving us functionality, that they're the reason we're alive, and each of them has their own role? And what does that say about, say, community and economy? And um, so this is exciting and fun for me. Um,
And my work, by the way, I'm wearing this Moving for Life. My work is very much about working with people in the cancer world, both the surgeons that do the work, but the patients themselves, the survivors, the thrivers, the women, the men, the binary folks. I mean, just everybody is going through breast cancer, even, and then other kinds of cancers. So the work has expanded over 25 years. This is a nonprofit. We provide the classes for free, and we try to get inside neighborhoods with teachers that are from those neighborhoods, speaking those languages. We teach in 8 different languages. So Moving for Life is about kind of getting moving. And when you're going through cancer, it's usually an organ. Sometimes it's a blood or, a fluid like lymph or blood that's impacted. And then one of the things we'll talk about is what is the community of the organs and how are they relating to each other and how are they saying no to the cancer, or if it has metastasized, what is the dialogue then? So what you just said about what is the story with the organs? Well, what happens when the community goes awry and
mm,
has some, I mean, I think almost everybody says stupid cancer. It's like cancer is not something we're wanting to invite. It is a negative force. It might be considered evil. It might be considered a teacher, just like evil could be defined as ignorance. But in any case, when you've been invaded with something that doesn't fit your community, it's going through your boundaries. How do you reestablish healthy boundaries, but stay in connection with the whole organ system, the whole community?
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so much interesting and rich metaphor here.
Mhm.
Martha, you were saying that you wanted to share with us about choice. So
Mhm.
what would you like to share with us about choice?
Well, I was thinking about the theme of
Sorry.
this summit, no problem, and just the whole idea of authoritarianism. And in my book, Mindful Movement, which is my first book, Mindful Movement, its subtitle is The Evolution of the Somatic Arts and Conscious Action. So, somatic arts meaning the soma, the living body, those systems that look and teach us to feel into our bodies. And that includes most movement rituals, dances, activities of indigenous cultures as a source for this newer field that started in the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, growing from people like Moshe Feldenkrais and F.M. Alexander and Gerda Alexander, who did something called Utoni, which is about harmony, and also my teacher, Irmgard Bartenieff, who I studied with and worked with as an assistant directly until her death. Um, that's the field of somatics with a capital S, but the soma is just a resource we all have, which is our living body that has its own ability to self-regulate within a community of interregulation, whether it's with other humans, animals, nature, or within our own bodies, like all the organs saying, okay, what can we do together to help get rid of this invader? Um, so I developed from the work of body mind centering and Bartenieff's work that she developed a curriculum from her teacher's work, Rudolf von Laban movement analysis. I taught for 10 years each of those systems and then put them together in dynamic embodiment. And this is like a dance program that uses principles from dynamic embodiment, as is body mind dancing or Bomida, which is BMD, three different short ways to say body mind dancing, Bomida, BMD, somatic dance. So these systems are all about having people feel into the resources from our bodies that give us choice. And when I wrote in Mindful Movement, The Evolution of the Somatic Arts, the history of the field of capital S somatics, I wanted to also say conscious action, just so people begin to go, okay, what does it mean to be an activist also consciously, not just like what I inherited from
Actively.
my parents, or not just what I've been told to do. So consciousness to me is about choice. And Maxine Sheets Johnston is a philosopher that comes out of dance who speaks of the first choice being the cellular choice,
Hmm.
like at the level of the amoeba, to go toward or away. That's a choice. Am I going to it? Am I moving away from it? And when do I step back? We know this as white-bodied people that it's important to step back right now and not constantly be leader. On the other hand, when do I come forward? Maybe even just to back somebody else up. So this question of when do I go forward? When do I go back? When do I go toward? Because it's three-dimensional. Like an amoeba doesn't have a front or back. It's just like expand or shrink. When do I expand into my space and claim it? And this is a woman, I'm encouraging more women to do that. But then and also anybody identified as a woman, just really how do you fill that space? And then there's also when do I need to shrink, whether it's for self-care
Hmm.
or to feel a feeling of hurt and rejection or shame and just be conscious about that action, or whether it's to just not take up so much space, to not be overprivileged. And I have written about that for Tarka magazine. It's the Embodied Philosophy Group's journal. And I wrote on white advantage in the somatic field and just
Hmm.
what's happening with that. It's old now, 5 years old. 5 years go by and it's like, oh, I'd love to change it. But I think it could be useful for some people just as a jumping off point. Um, so choice is in that shape change. Do I want to be big or small?
Hmm.
it's also in the effort life that we just talked about, those rhythms, those movements. Do I want to be effervescent and project that? And that's actually what I do in my coaching. You did start to say somatic coaching, and that is something that we've done as dynamic embodiment practitioners for years. Not all of our work is hands-on deep tissue connecting with healing and knee replacement, post-surgical rehab. I work with the Yale School of Medicine right now with the surgeons to help them with their own posture, but they're also learning to work with take this in and use it in terms of how they're speaking with their patients. I mean, we're just coming into that cusp right now. So the main thing is this choice idea, and that choice exists in our rhythms and in our use of space, how much space we take up, how much space we choose to claim or unconsciously overclaim, the man's
Yeah,
red, which could be female too, or it could be racialized, any of that.
I was going to say that this makes me think of Gloria Steinem wrote about like men, like there was a study about how much more space men take up in public than women, and that there was something about, it's been a while since I read this, but something like what, first of all, nobody noticed, but second of all, if interviewers followed up and asked, do you want to be taking up so little space? Do you want to be taking up so much space? The answer was usually no.
Mm.
Even the men taking up a lot of space were like, oh, no, I didn't actually want to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. So you just validated why the last two words of my book are conscious action. That is
Mm,
a sign of being unconscious of our behavior. And honestly, I mean, the body does its own thing. We can walk without thinking about it. We don't have to direct it. We don't need to be conscious of our walk until it hurts.
mm.
And so there's a lot that we want to keep free. We want our cortex to be available to write symphonies and plans and strategize and be creative and to be present emotionally for our family, which is just subcortical. And so let the cerebellum and other parts of the brain just work with rhythmicity and automaticity. I mean, we want to automate our emails. Let's automate. That metaphor comes from within our own body. We have very many automated behaviors. And again, they can be intergenerational or they can be cultural from a new period in one's life, a shift, a chosen new identity. Again, in choice, we can choose to re-automate. And that's what the somatic work, and in particular, dynamic embodiment is about. So my work is about knowing what these options are and then having choice around them. How do we access it? So if someone's never really, they mostly slouched and they don't have a sense of the power of the bones for my uprightness, actually learning it, going back to the baby movement, the neurodevelopmental piece of babies using strength to push their heads up so that they can then sit up tall. If we don't have that, then that's a workshop anybody can take that basically is going through the birth. And what did we learn through birth? What was that movement, that birth spiral of really reaching with our heads and pushing with our feet to come out of this tight space? Now, that's assuming a vaginal birth. But of course, many people have had cesarean births, and thank God for those who really needed it, or goddess, or just the universe for, be having more lives
Gotcha.
saved from science. Um, and yet there's a commercialization of cesarean births around the world right now where it's just easier for doctors. Let's have an appointment, let's just do it, and then you just heal. But what is the significance of losing that neurodevelopmental movement
Right.
that then carries in our bodies later? So I can't tell you how many children, because I worked with people in pregnancy through to hospice, and I teach this in my training programs, but also how many toddlers and little people really signal to me that they want to be rebirthed. Like they start pushing their heads against my thigh or hugging me and nudging, and I'm like, oh, let's do the rebirth. But also adults. Adults don't nudge up against me that way, but they will signify that they can't really accomplish something. They
Mm.
they don't finish the task. There's a way in which they didn't have some of what they needed.
I'm far too interested in this. Let's what do you want to say about somatics and activism, the difference that somatics can make for activists? And then we'll go to your free gift and we'll close.
Okay, so I just want to go back to when I developed my work, which was a blend of body mind centering, which is this embodiment neurodevelopmental perspective, with Laban movement analysis, which looks at the body in space, like where am I? This body part is moving to the side, and is it doing so in a very direct way, or is it kind of going in a three-dimensional way to the side? So that's the shape. Is my organ just kind of being functional, or can it be expressive? But also, is the quality quick, or is it sustained and light, for instance? So the body in space with dynamics and interaction and shape. So we put those together, and I was always talking about it and always crediting my teachers. And one of my students, she's actually the co-author of the book, Dynamic Embodiment of the Sun Salutation, which is looking at hormonal regulation and how it relates to the chakras. She said, "What is your work, Martha?" And it took me a while to come up with a model, just to name it. It didn't take long, maybe a month or two. After doing this work already for, at that point, about 20, 12 to 22 years. I don't know, even know, but it was already in the 2000s. Um, and I said, it is about observation. So everything I've just described is about keen observation, witnessing compassionately, being present with someone, and noticing and having a framework for how movement works and what it means. And that's where the coaching comes in with the meaning, like why is that movement taking over? Um, and then there's also support. And the support was twofold: supporting what's working well, like buoying people up, building confidence, but also supporting the shadow areas, the under-resourced areas. And then moving into options for two reasons. One is, if you have an old habit and you don't practice the new one, it's not going to change. That automatization is going to be so strong that the old habit's just going to keep rearing its head. But the other is to just find new experiences and to open up to the many, many choices that we have. So here we are at choice. So choice is the main reason I teach my work.
Mm.
But embedded in the process of teaching is building community. So the people that are in the dynamic embodiment community, which is maybe about 300 graduates at this point around the world, are all people that get that we have to shift our paradigm, that we need to learn from indigenous cultures about the connectivity. And this is related to activism in my mind, like that anytime we make a plan, has the plan got within it a land permission? I just was in Australia. I want to know the native names of different parts of Australia. Um, but even on the airplane, and it was the Australian Qantas airline, before we landed, they would name the people that have been living and are still living on that land. So that's land acknowledgement. But beyond that, in the dance circles or the movement circles, we would ask permission to begin dancing from the ancestors that are still holding the land. So that kind of interconnectivity of like, okay, I'm going to work with you to be better at, being confident and without pain in your upper back. And so we're going to work with the psychophysical aspects, both the psychological, not in psychotherapeutic kind of model, but just your psyche and how you feel. And, that's the coaching piece. And then the actual physical piece, which is understanding and embodying the anatomy and finding out what resources are there. So at each of these levels, either the meaning making psyche, or the physical, we want to find the support for what's working well, the support for what has been kind of in pain or discomfort or numb. And activists are just as good at getting numb after being exhausted and overworked and sort of ignoring their bodies rather than getting cues from our bodies.
Mm,
So we're looking, that support piece feels like the most important part for activists. Maybe having more of a framework of interconnectivity, a framework of movement is important. What are the rituals being done to support both community and body in, just the revving up to go out and do an action? What are we recognizing as our privilege, if we are privileged in any way, whether it's about gender or race or economics or sexual preference and orientation? So any of that can be really embodied as an opening to begin a meeting. And
mhm,
that is where I want to come full circle, which is my parents were community organizers, but they
mhm,
were spiritual. So they would begin every meeting in a collective intention, which they called a prayer, but shifted into a meditation as the 70s came around. Some of the first very interfaith folks, including agnostics and people that were atheists, to get the job done, start in circle
mm,
and find what the common intention is. Even if it is our intention is to figure out what we want to do here.
mm,
Let's be present with that for a moment and in silence and allow whatever universal forces that are of good to infuse. So for me, that's already supportive. And then coming into the support phase, well, where are we feeling strong and where are we feeling weak? It's a kind of analysis. And now community organizing has all of that, but it used to be, especially when educated people came into a community that hadn't had access to educational systems that were helpful to them. They had their own internal educations of their culture. Um, they a lot of the social workers, let's say, coming in to see what the food level was or the family dynamic was with children or whatever, they might just come in with their judgment and their checklists versus what is working here.
mm,
What do you have as strengths? What can we support you with around that? How can we use our privilege to make what's working well in your community, even if it's a poor community, really shine? And I
yeah.
realized my parents were doing this exact what I call OSO model. OSO being a bear in Spanish, OSO being observe, support, and offer options.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So we are essentially out of time. Tell people uh, super quick about the free gift that you are offering them.
So I have a pet interest, which is that my eyes, I was told when I was about 12 that I needed glasses, and I saw that my sister had had eye exercises that were actually for helping her two eyes work together. But I had never seen anybody else with lenses that she could use, prismatic lenses. And so I said to my parents, why isn't there something I can do? I don't want to wear glasses. And that set me on a path for my life. And all of my certification projects in my being certified as a body mind centering practitioner, as a certified movement analyst, Laban movement analyst, um, Laban Bartenia movement analyst, uh, have been around vision. And
Mhm.
so I have wanted to do self-care around the eyes, and especially with screen time having taken over our lives in the last 30 years and more in the last 20 and 15 and 5. I mean, it just gets more and more and more. Used to be going to movies were really great because there was distance and you would watch a moving screen. That's actually good for the eyes. At distance,
Mm,
watching movement. That's like being back out on the prairie and looking for animals or out on a sailboat and seeing if there's a whale. But Now we're just on these little screens at home sometimes. Some people have the privilege of a big screen, but how big is the room? Is it 20 feet or more? So I teach a class called I Renewal. And you can say I, like I, the letter I, or you can say E-I-E. It's I care, same thing. I care about my eye care. I care about brushing my teeth. Do I care about my vision? And that's what this class is. It's 1 hour. I usually offer it twice a month, and it's going to be, on the schedule. So for a limited time, like over the course of 3 months, you can pick one of those Thursdays and come live, or you can sign up. And if you really can't make it, you can say, please send me the recording. So I hope you join me in eye renewal or eye care with the whole body, because we do whole body movement as well, stretching, breathing, posture to help vision.
Super great. Martha, so wonderful to be with you as always.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we have.
And here's my wrap. I would
Oh,
say that for activists, our vision is our place of envisioning and imagining
mm,
and seeing in a synesthetic way with multimodal perception. You could smell it, you can feel it, you can hear it, but the vision is a really important place for seeing what potential we have.
oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Martha.
Thank you.